All right, hi everyone. Welcome to this interview. And today I have a great honor of having Indra Nooyi online. Indra, do you mind saying hi to the audience?
Good morning, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be chatting with all of you. And I want to say thank you to City Press for making this happen.
Yeah, wonderful. I want to say that I'm extremely excited about this interview. And I've, of course, as many people, many women have heard of your name for a long time. And then because of this opportunity, I've had the chance of reading your book in full from cover to cover. And I was telling my parents that I was immersed in your life for the last week. And there are so many parts of the book. I think it will be so beneficial for whoever who read it. But before I get to the book, I will just say a few words about who Indra Nooyi is and why you should stick around for this interview. So, Indra is a legendary CEO, I would say, in American corporate history, and she's the first ever Indian woman CEO that made it to a iconic American consumer product company, PepsiCo. And I think she also relate a lot, personally to myself, I think to this generation of Chinese who were actually like her, but probably China was, I would say, a generation later, because I went to the US in 2000 and you went when you were 24. I went when I was 24, but you were there. Also a very typical story, coming to a new country that's not culture, and kind of breaking into a ceiling, or you don't even know where the ceiling is, getting to know the ceiling and breaking it. And it eventually established itself as the undebatable leader in this very American corporate world. And of course, I think compared to any other CEO, Indra is very also special because she's also a mother and she has two daughters. And she has managed that through her career as well. So that was, Indra in brief. But there are so many things about her we'll hopefully get to more in this interview. So Indra, in reading your book, I was trying to summarize what are my feelings. I think I'll summarize it in like three parts. The first part of it is the parts that made me cry. I actually cried. I counted 5 times when I was reading your book. And second are stories of you that made me laugh. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of laughable moments in your story, and it was excellent written book. It's very lighthearted in many parts. That's actually facing a very serious issue, and you're very punctual to it. And then the third part is parts that make me think. And there are many statements and many facts I've known through your book that really elicit a lot of reflections on our status quo as a world, both in terms of business and in terms of the society. So I'm going to selfishly use my reflections to your book to guide this interview, if you don't mind. So the first time I cried reading your book is when your Tata passed. So Tata is your grandpa on your mother's side. And I think that was when you were 18, right? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's right, on your father's side. I'm sorry about that. And yeah, can you tell us about that? Like, obviously, I think you also said explicitly that was the person that has, great impact in your life, on your childhood. Can we start there?
Sure. First of all, it's a pleasure to talk with you today. And I want to say that when I wrote the book, I was reflecting on my life, but really trying to land on what should be some policy decisions we need to make regarding women. That's where I started. But then I ended up telling the story, my life story, so that I could inform my policy choices through my life story. So this was not a tell-all, not a memoir. It was more talking about the arc of my life. And the arc of my life starts with my family back in India. And just as you said, most Asian immigrants who come to the United States, who read my book say, God, I saw myself in the book. My family was right there in the book. I could relate to the book, all these experiences. So in many ways, as Asians, our cultures have so much similarity, and the role of parents and grandparents plays an outsized role in our life. They are the strong figures in our family. They have a foot on the brake and a foot on the accelerator. They either develop us and coach us and give us confidence, or they take us down. In my case, my parents and my grandfather in particular, my father's father, my paternal grandfather, was a huge force in encouraging the girls, the two daughters, to study, to dream, to do whatever we wanted to do. And he said, look, my job is to help you get there. So he devoted his life to his granddaughters and his grandson later, but the granddaughters came first. So without my tata, my paternal grandfather, I wouldn't be here today, because he sparked in my life, in my spirit, early dreams of being somebody that I never thought I'd be. So he was the biggest force. Uh, and, as a male man in my life, because, he was always there for us, even when my father was traveling, he gave us confidence as girls. And it's very important that you give the girl children confidence. And he did. So I always look at him as the foundation of my life.
Yeah. Thank you. And then exactly, I think because you talked about this multi-generational living, which of course for Chinese family, we're very familiar with it too. And I had similarly had very strong impact from my own, my maternal grandfather. That's why I defaulted to that role. It's the same thing. Yeah, I think I was having an interview this morning. I was saying the biggest impact is that I felt I was never treated differently. Like I wasn't like very similar to your book. Like you weren't like because you were a girl, you were treated differently. And I didn't realize how impactful that was back then until much later and saying this is very rare. Yeah. And then I was
one
very
of the biggest issues in society today, because right when you have children, you treat the boys differently than the girls. In some ways you should, but not necessarily in giving them confidence or giving them dreams and aspirations. And we do that, and then we hold the women back, women who are extremely smart, extremely brilliant. And I think society needs them because at the end of the day, we're in a war for talent. So we need the extraordinary brains of anybody who has it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I think also that's where you started right there, talking about family, the importance of family, the importance of this invisible, almost invisible social infrastructure we live on, because that's kind of deliberately ignored when you go to a corporate life, because people assume like somehow you're on your own. And it was designed not, especially for women with kids. And I think then that's where it made me, I guess, ponder for the first time is when you talked about your first mentor, which is this Englishman in the white Mercedes Benz who who actually who delivered you, I guess, coffee when you were lining up at the U.S. Embassy to get your visa. Yeah, can you share with us about that experience?
Again, exactly as you said, we are a product of our mentorship, of all the mentors who've come into our life and pushed us along with our family members. And I was lucky that, there were people who stepped out in my life from their jobs and said, I like what I'm seeing in this person, so let me push this person. I never went to him and said, will you be my mentor? Never. I've never gone to anybody and said, can you be my mentor? Because I honestly believe mentors pick you, you don't pick them. And they pick you because they see something in you that they like, and they think that supporting you will also make them look good. And so right from the time I was a high school student in debating competitions, which I would strongly recommend for everybody, the judges on debating committees would step up and say, God, I like this young girl. How can I push her to get more opportunities? And therefore, I ended up in all kinds of forums and seminars where I don't even know how I got picked. But now I'm realizing it's these debating judges who pushed me. And just like that, this Englishman who was running the textile company that I was working for in India decided to be a self-appointed mentor. And he put me ahead of the company. He said, I want you to do what's right for you, even though selfishly, I want you to stay in the company. And I think, I don't want to clip your wings, fly. Go for it. And I'll come and talk to your parents because I think it's so important that you live out your dreams. I don't think you find many people like that. It's a level of unselfishness. Mentorship is unselfishness. And when you have people who are unselfish, who care about the next and next generations flying, it's the best kind of mentors you can ever have.
Yeah. And
That's
you
what I
said,
had with Norman Wade.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's something you said really stuck with me. You said you don't pick mentors and mentor pick you.
Mhm.
And that has been the case. I think for many women, they would have this question: how do I get a mentor to pick me? It seems like that seems passive, right? It seems like, okay, if I don't do anything, somebody would pick me. But obviously, through your book, that has been what really happened to you. Like everybody sort of, people just showed up, that, you know, like from unexpected places. But like, how would you answer the question from typical, you know, I think lots of women, like, how do I get picked?
It's the quality of your work, how you behave, the ethics, your character. It's your whole package. It is not about how you dress or how you look or your beauty. It's got nothing to do with that. It's really how do you put the company before you? How do you really speak truths to power in a sensible way, not in a confrontational, negative way? What's your character, core character? Um, are you really willing to seek the truth and do work that furthers what you're given to do? Do you put your hand up for the tough assignments? People look at a complex set of issues. There isn't a menu that you can write down in you. But I think what happens is, as leaders, you're looking for people who make your life easy. And if working for somebody makes their life easy, man, they look at you and say, I never want to lose this person. So I want to push this person along because he's making my life so easy. Interesting what I need, what the CEO is the head of the company. So by anticipating what the CEO needs, you're anticipating what the company needs. And if you think that way, people pick you. But I have to tell you, it's a lot of work. It doesn't just happen. You have to think hard about the company, think about the job you're doing, read, learn, become a student again. So if you're willing to do the work yourself, I think people try to pull you along too. It's a two-way street.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think your book, again, I'm in a way, this interview won't cover all of it, and probably only won't cover even 1/10 of what's written in the book. I strongly recommend everybody watching this actually get a copy of the book. Get a copy of this book. It's available in Chinese. So the English name is called My Life in Full. Is Indra in her first person tone. And the Chinese name is 第一选择，大家应该可以在这个直播间看到哈，非常难得。Yeah, so let's backtrack a little bit when we talk about how you started. We talk about your first mentor, and then that comes to the place where I first laughed. I really kind of almost laughed my shoes off when you talked about how you prepare for your first interview when you have $50 of budget, and then trying to get a suit, and I have to tell you how I relate to that, because my first interview was with McKinsey, was similar to you. And I didn't even have $50. I actually borrowed a suit. So I borrowed a suit from someone, a Korean girl in my lab. And I know she just went to a interview and actually had invested in the suit. And I was similar built with her. I said, can I borrow? Yeah, so that's why when I saw your story and then the way it turned out, and then the fact that you didn't have a chance to try it on and how it looked. But for people who haven't read the book, can you share with us that story?
So this is in 1979. I have to get a summer job because if I don't get a summer job, I don't have money to live in the summer. So I'm desperate. And so I'm going to apply for as many jobs as I can, hoping to get one. But in those days, there weren't too many international students. There was no international office to help you dress or give you rented clothes. There were no rent the runway kind of stuff. So you're on your own. Nobody's there to teach you. So I realize now I can't wear my saris or my lousy jeans and tops. I actually have to look like another person who's interviewing for the job. So I go to the local Kmart, or Kresge's as it was called. It's a discount store. And I pick out a pantsuit, a blue pantsuit with a bright blue shirt. And the reason pantsuit is because I'd never worn anything that showed my legs before. I'd never worn a skirt. And so I bought a polyester, dark blue polyester pantsuit. And when I looked at the fitting room menu, it had a curtain. And I thought people might look in. I was too ashamed. So I decided to just take the clothes back to the room and, to my dorm room and take my chances. My interview was the next day. I also remembered my mother telling me, always buy clothes a couple of sizes bigger because you'll grow into it. So I picked out a jacket that was a little bigger. Then I went to the dorm room and I tried it on. It looked awful. The jacket was hanging on me. The trousers were about an inch too short. The blue blouse was way too bright. Now I'm desperate because the stores have closed. I look pretty ghastly, but I realized that the clock has run out. So I put on this outfit and I walk into the interview room where everybody's waiting. All the students burst out laughing because I looked horrible. But I had to go to the interview. So I put on a brave face, walked in, did the interview, came out and went to the development office and started to cry. I said, everybody's laughing at me. Tell me what's the matter. And she said to me, have you looked at yourself in the mirror? It looks pretty bad. I said, but I don't have any money to buy any more clothes. I had $50. I've spent it all. She said, what would you wear for an interview if you were in India? I said, I'd wear a sari. She said, do you have saris here? I said, yes, plenty. I brought a lot of them. She said, well, wear the sari. Because if they don't hire you for who you are, it's their loss. So the next day I had an interview with Booz Allen Hamilton and I wore a sari. That horrible outfit I wore and went for the interview, that company made 2 job offers and I was one of them. And so this is when I realized that I had come to a very unusual country, which is a true meritocracy. And I was touched, I was overwhelmed, and I was emotional about what this country afforded me as opportunities. They looked past my awful clothes and said, this person might be able to contribute to the company. And so I realized a new game had begun in my own life, which had nothing to do with looks. It had to do with contributions, your capability, and your mentorship, because I had professors who were mentoring me at Yale.
Yeah, yeah. Now I really want to thank you for writing all the stories in the book, because usually people, don't want to look back at this embarrassing moments, right? So, you've moved past it. You had a high flyer executive life, for decades afterwards. But being so yeah, being so authentic and actually sharing those moments. And it's very empowering. And because I think, as you said, many people find themselves in your book, because even today, about 15% of Americans are immigrants. They're not born in the US. So it's a large number.
Yeah.
Of course, myself as well. And then sort of reading your chapters by chapter, how you arrived, how you were. I remember you used the line, you said, like, every immigrant's life begins with fear, awe, and a sense of loneliness. And that was so sharply said. Yeah, and then it was exactly how I felt as well. And I remember, because as many Chinese students, we were the same. We arrived with 2 suitcases. I remember in my own package, I had a Chinese cleaver,
Exactly,
a knife, because
your friendly cleaver, right?
Exactly, because that's how you cook, right? You can't cook with American knife. Like, I was like, well, like, we have blankets and everything, right? And with a very limited amount of US dollars that our family scrambled to do some exchange, which is like, thank you really for putting that down. And as you said, also it's so inspiring because it's in the US that's possible. Like, people don't really kind of, maybe they will laugh at you, but like, but opportunities are still open to you. And then also there are people who are so candid in offering you advices and input and help.
Yeah,
and
well,
thank
I
you
want to be clear. It's not that they didn't laugh at me. They did laugh at me. But they also said, Indra dresses weird, talks weird, but she's pretty smart. Okay. And so they gave me a chance.
Yeah.
I was willing to work hard. If
Yeah.
I had to just get through based on looks and the way I dressed and the way I talked, I would have been a dud.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you also said very sharply in that paragraph, in that chapter, and talking about, you said why people like you. You work hard, you're smart, you get things done. But you also know very clearly that there's a certain category people put immigrant students in. Like, they don't have style, they don't know American sports and all that, right? So I think that also echo a lot with my early days. I remember I never watched baseball. I don't know what that is. And then you have an advantage of playing cricket. I never played cricket. And then football, I don't know what it is. And you feel like you're missing half the conversation.
That's true. And us immigrant students, not immigrant students, I would say, colored immigrant students, the brown and the black and the Asian students, we all hung out together.
Right.
It's the only support structure.
Yeah.
Really, in those days, now it's different. In those days, nobody really wanted us there because they didn't know how to deal with us.
Right.
So the first
Yeah.
year was tough, second year got easier.
Yeah, exactly. How share with us how you sort of broke that? Because you did write it in the book, but I want the audience to hear from you. Like how did you move sort of out of that block in a way?
The first year was very tough. But you know what? The other international students, people from Latin America, people from the West Indies, people from India, Philippines, were all there. We all hung out together. We cooked together, we chatted together. The dorm we lived in was, cook your own food and stays. And not a very nice dorm, but it was a dorm where we could cook. There were kitchens. So us international students bonded. And we knew we were different. We did not look like the majority who'd go to Cape Cod or skiing in the mountains. For us, snow was unheard of. We'd never seen snow. And so it was a lifestyle we were not used to. And also, we had no money. And so we had to work 8 hours, save every penny. So our economics were completely different, completely different. And you know what? When you don't have any money, you don't aspire for things you don't need. Okay, so we never dreamed about going on ski vacations or going to the Cape because it was beyond our realm of possibility. We just worried about putting our heads down, doing the work, making money so that we can put food on the table for ourselves, and finding a job. That's all we focused on. Very simple. But I think by the time the second year rolled along, because I had had a summer job at Booz Allen, which was, difficult to get a consulting job those days, people sort of perked up and said, this person must be something. So maybe we should include her in our groups. Maybe we should include her in our project writing. And so all of a sudden you became popular based on your performance. And again, talk about the role of mentors in you. I had a couple of professors fiercely believed in me. Fiercely. There was a Professor Larry Isaacson who taught strategy and marketing. Larry Isaacson would tell every interviewer, have you talked to Indra? And they're like, who is she? Oh, you've got to talk to her. When you have a professor like that who's well known, who's well respected in your corner, and I would do anything for Larry. Larry would ask me to teach on his behalf career women in New Haven or do some special projects on the side, and I would do it. He was just the most unbelievable person who gave me confidence. He was my tata in Yale. He gave me confidence. He built me up. He endorsed me. He supported me. And when I was lonely, I could go to Larry's suite and he'd give me a project. So I'd be busy working on it. And so I never felt the loneliness so badly. And I think that's what got me through Yale, between my Helen Hadley Hall, where the international students were there, the international students at Yale School of Management, and a couple of these professors who are big supporters. They made my life pretty good.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. No, indeed, it's in essence, I think it's two things. It's one, it's a system based on meritocracy. It does value performance, and second, you do perform. You do very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think then that actually leads to the second time when the book made me cry is when you were in those early years, your dad passed away. And then I was just really crying with you when you wrote about it, and then how young he was, and how the fact that they've concealed the news to you for months. And that's also so typical of Chinese parents too. I think probably for all the parents, like who would say, let's not tell them the horrible news. We'll sort of manage it. But yeah, yeah. And then when you find out, it's too late. And it was devastating too, right? So but that also became sort of a turning point for you, because that's when you were with BCG, if I recall, and you were thinking about quitting, right? Share with us that story around that turning point.
I think it was in 82. And I get a call from home that my father is very sick, has been sick for the past few months, has lost about 70 or 80 pounds, and he's going to undergo surgery to find out why, and your kids might want to come home. So all three of us were in the US at that time. we all rushed back home. And, they operated on him and found out that he has pancreatic cancer, which is a death blow. In those days, pancreatic cancer was always discovered in stage 4. And the doctor said, he has less than 6 months to live. Of course, we never gave up. We put my father on a plane and brought him to the US to find a cure, because we assumed the US would have a cure. The doctor said, no, there isn't anything. So keep him comfortable, stay with him, and that's it. Now, I was working at BCG, and we needed the job because my husband was in business time at the University of Chicago. And I didn't know how to go to BCG as a young consultant and say, I need time off to be with my father who's dying. And if I don't get the salary, how are we going to manage? It's not going to be easy. And so we were debating these issues and saying, how are we going to manage through all this? Because I could not have worked while taking care of my father. Even though my mother was there, my brother took a semester off from Yale. Until BCG called me at home and said, Indra, this is Carl, the head of the Chicago office. And he said, we talked about you in the management committee today, and we decided that we're going to give you 6 months off with pay so you can stay with your father and spend time with him. I was blown away because there was no paid leave in those days. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody had gotten it. That BCG offered it on its own. It's a huge tribute to Carl Stern, who was head of the office in Chicago, and that he called me with such a humaneness and conveyed the news. It didn't make me feel bad. Then he added saying that we talked to your clients, and they've all decided to put the projects on hold till you come back. Which was also, I couldn't believe the clients were being so nice about it.
I heard of, yeah.
I was touched and emotional about it. So my father died in 3 months, and I went back to work within a day after he died. So I didn't abuse the leave. So 3 months, I was with him, and he was in my home in Chicago. And he died at a young age of 61. And that was and he was a big figure in my life. I adored my dad. I was daddy's girl, and losing him was very, very, very difficult. Very difficult.
Yeah.
I watched him suffer through pancreatic cancer, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And so losing him was tough, but the incredible generosity of BCG to give me the time off endeared me to them a lot.
Yeah. No, and then thank you also for writing the book in such a personal way, because it really drew me in. Because I think that's also the time when you were pregnant, right? So you were pregnant with your
first child.
Yeah, right. And then you talked about how, I can almost sort of feel being in your body, like you have a new life sort of forming inside of you. But your dear father who gave you life is passing, and you're in the midst of completely new environment. Like, you just started your career, newlywed in a new apartment that's not even furnished or something like that. I remember, right? So like
not furnished. Most of the rooms were empty and desperately ill with morning sickness.
Yeah, exactly. And then so I think, thank you for writing that, because it's so real, because that's what our life is. And it's oftentimes we talk about our life, our career, with sort of omitting that part, right? So, or this is just a note. Okay, my father passed, or my child was born. But actually,
two things happened there. First is that I had the support of my husband. He was there with me every step of the way. And second is, when my father passed, my mother came and lived with me to take care of me and help with childcare. And I think without these two, I couldn't have done anything. Because how can you keep a job like a consulting job requires travel? You can't get near food because the smell makes you sick. And one child is born. It's going to help you care for an infant. You can't trust your baby with babysitters because the baby is tiny. And, you want to make sure that, if something goes wrong. Those days, remember, we had no technology to put a camera or whatever. And so my mother said, okay, look, I'll take care of the baby. And so the fact that she came and lived with us for a couple of years, taking care of our first daughter, Preeta, and the fact that I had a supportive husband made all the difference in the world. Couldn't have done
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why you said, I think that's why you make it so explicit in your book and all the sort of invisible part of your life. Like, because people see you as a CEO, as an aspiring consultant, but it is this large hidden, almost hidden support network that made it all possible. And thank you for
And
calling
to
that
be
out.
honest, I don't know how anybody can do it without that hidden network.
Yeah,
Not even hidden, it can be out in the open. But
right.
without that network, it's not possible to do everything, because then you're putting too much of a burden on the woman, and some part of your life is going to collapse. So you need that support structure. It's like having multiple of you surrounding you, right? It's like having
Yeah,
three
absolutely.
schools around
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I'm amazed how well you read the book. Amazing detail. I'm impressed, totally impressed. Oh my goodness.
Thank you. I did. I was an ex-consultant, so I
Well, but a lot of ex-consultants have read the book, but not as well as you have.
Thank you for the compliment. No, indeed, because I was deeply moved, and then really thank you for that comment as well. Yeah, we talk about the hidden network. I'll go back. No, I want to echo that because you probably know I have 3 children, and all 3 of them I had when I was at McKinsey.
Oh, good.
So and every time, of course, I'm very thankful to the McKinsey support as well. Every time I have paid leave, and I have a very supportive partner group and client. But every time my mother came, my aunt came, like, I have to hire somebody, and I have a husband as well. And then so all of them all together made it possible. But again, like, and people only see the bright side of saying, well, you're so smart, you're so capable, you made it. I was like, no, I can't.
That's right. That's exactly right. People don't
Yeah.
realize the all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. So I think make it in the open. I'll say a few things in Chinese. 所以我想希望大家也能看到这本书，就是因为他在这本书里面特别的坦诚，把整个这个过程，他家里是谁来帮他忙啊，怎么解决的这些问题，都写得非常的诚实啊，所以非常难得。I was just saying that in Chinese and saying it's a rarely candid and book, and it's badly needed, and for somebody like you to put it in the open, and it's very powerful.
But the
And I
thing
think that
that amazes is that I think the generation before us was very unselfish, and they
true.
wanted to help out their children. I hope the generations that follow also have a commitment to the next generation. I know that I keep telling my kids, have kids, and I'll help you take care of them. The question is every generation going to be unselfish about wanting to
Yeah.
to the next generation?
Yeah.
If we don't do that, if we don't have intergenerational responsibility and multi-generational living, it's not going to work.
Yeah, indeed. Because I think sociology uses this called the global care chain. So there's a care chain that, as you said, is like a multi-generational. People were giving and paying forward.
Exactly right.
Right. And then so we're actually part of this massive ecosystem.
That's
But
right.
the ecosystem was largely carried by women, which means it's largely invisible and untalked about.
Unpaid. Unpaid.
Unpaid, exactly. And then I think that was also one of the motivations of putting that all in the open, right?
Right. I mean, look,
Yeah.
when you give birth to a girl child, you don't say, I gave birth to an unpaid laborer for life. That's wrong. But that's what we end up doing. They're unpaid, they're uncelebrated, they don't get a break. And we expect them to keep going until they drop dead. And I think there's something wrong with that equation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for calling that out. And I think the next time the book made me cry is when you're into motherhood, is when you and your husband were in the therapist's office, having a therapist talking about how your daughter was bullied. Yeah, maybe you don't mind sharing that story, like how, like, because people would think, okay, now you're good. You send your kids to good schools, you live in a good neighborhood, and down, like something happened, like you have never expected.
Well, we lived in a neighborhood where there were not too many colored people. In fact, there were none. And my first daughter was in school in a public school. It was outstanding public school. But she was probably one of 2 or 3 colored kids in the whole school. In the elementary school, I'm not even talking about middle school or high school. I'm talking of elementary school. And, she was a wonderful student, eager, would love to go to school. And all of a sudden, we're noticing that she's not turning in her homework. School is sending notes saying she hasn't done homework. So we go visit, and they go, she hasn't turned in homework for over a week. We go, but she's done her homework every day. We've seen it. We go to her room. It's all in the drawer. She hasn't turned it in. And so we're very worried now. So we go to a psychologist and say, could you go to the school without our daughter knowing you're there for us and observe what's going on in class and why she's so, depressed. So the psychologist gets permission from the school and sits in the classroom for a day. And she calls us urgently and says, I need to talk to you. And she says, what this kid, they were doing all these things. And the worst part was that the teachers in the lunchroom were watching all this. And we realized that we had now experienced discrimination and bullying to a very extreme level. But unfortunately, our daughter had to experience it. So immediately we had to take our daughter out of the public school and put her in, a convent of the Sacred Heart, which was a fantastic school. And she thrived there. But I have to tell you, what we witnessed in the public school shook us, to the core, because we never experienced that before. And that our child had to go through it was very bothersome.
Yeah.
Painful.
I know. And then you said both of you, and then when you wrote, like you and your husband was listening to this recount, and yeah, because it broke my heart, because that's my daughter now. I have 3 kids. My youngest is also 10. So I was almost have her image in my mind. Well, this is like happening to her. So that's
when we went to the school the next day and confronted them with all this.
Yeah.
Their reaction was, why did she tell you this? Like, hey, we got your permission. We paid her. We got your permission to have her sit in the class. She gave us a report. Why are you now attacking the psychologist for telling us the truth?
Yeah.
So I would have thought the school principal would have said, God, we are sorry this happened.
I know.
One bit. And to me, that was even more bothersome than what really happened. So realize that there was rottenness to the core there. So it's just not something that, everything has changed. Now the situation is different. But those days, it was difficult.
Yeah, yeah. And also you share another example. I remember when you guys are buying a house or renting a house, and are basically denied in certain neighborhood.
We've
I know.
experienced it all. But what we did was, there were these examples of discrimination. But if we focus on the majority of examples and experiences that were very welcoming and wonderful, in every community, every society, there's some percentage of discrimination. And we focused on the positive. There were so many people that helped us, so many people that supported us. The small examples of discrimination pale when you think of the large numbers of support we got.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for putting in perspective, because that sometimes I got those questions too, because if you read in the news, America is full of problems. There are racial problems, conflicts even today. And they would say, well, then it's a bad country. I was like, well, it's true. Every society has a problem. There isn't a perfect country anywhere. Second, I think there are plenty of people like yourself actually, making that visible. And that's exactly what drives the society forward. And really thank you for putting that in perspective as well.
I am a colored woman, and I became CEO of a Fortune 50 company in the United States. So I look at myself and say, I am a proud testament to the unbelievable environment that exists in the US and the role of mentors, both.
But people, I think like myself, and also many Chinese American or Chinese who live in America now, can echo that statement. But at the same time, there are many things that you put out that's so inspirational for many other people who didn't manage to do, is the fact that you're very tough in sort of holding your own ground. Because I remember you talked about how when you were the corporate strategy head, and you got attacked many times. I was like ABB or something like that. And then there was a time when you basically left the meeting and flew home. and that must be out of ultimate frustration. And you actually said that 80% of what you got is opposition, criticism, right? And then so and reading your book is like, well, it's really a tough battle in a way. Yeah. So like, also share with us a bit like that experience, like, because yes, it's a meritocracy for sure, but that doesn't mean it's easy.
No, meritocracy is easy, because
Yeah.
meritocracy is you've got to earn your job every day. Okay. But as long as everybody's earning their job every day, I'm okay. All right. In many ways, I would say I was in a hole when people met me first. But as long as I was willing to get out of the hole and move forward, the chances were very good. Let me come back and say that life was tough. There are many, many examples where, people didn't believe in you or thought your ideas were bad, but you had to fight. I think the most important thing is that if you want to speak truth to power, do it the right way. Don't do it in a negative way. Second, don't compromise your character and your work for holding on to a job. Don't get political and say, I'm just going to be political because I have to hold on to the job. Because then you'll start compromising a lot of stuff that you stood for. And as long as you can run your personal life without your salary having to be present in the family, live within your means. In our case, my husband and I, we decided that we would live on the lower of the two salaries. We would never live too ahead of ourselves. No debt. We've never had debt. So we lived frugally because we wanted to be able to speak our mind. We wanted to be able to be our people. And that's how we've lived life all our lives. And that's why we can rest calmly as opposed to being agitated about the job.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I like the word frugal because that's very Chinese too.
Yeah.
I remember
there's so much commonality in terms of values, etc., etc. I mean, multi-generation living, intergenerational responsibility, respect for the elders, value of education, hard work, all of this is common. I think the advantage we had coming from India was that all our schooling was in English. We all spoke English at home. The language was an advantage. Second, I grew up in a democracy, so I knew exactly what free markets were like and what capitalism was like. So that gave me an edge. And the third is that, the family allowed to leave and go in those days, which was unheard of. Okay. And the combination of all of that and coming to this great country, which, I'd read about, heard about, listened about, all of a sudden to come here and say, my God, I can be anything I want to be, was just a liberating experience. And so there's so many things that led me to the US, the foundation, my journey to the US, but then what happened in the US is something that I am deeply grateful to the country for. And I'm sure you are too. I'm deeply grateful to the US for giving me the opportunity to be whatever I wanted to be. And that's why I always talk about the country with gratitude and thanks.
Yeah. And also, you, as you mentioned, you have, and I think you're very candid about it too. Like you have in a way, a very rare combination coming from this very educated family in India that, it's very open-minded in supporting girls, and your own mother. And then you mentioned your mother's story, which is deeply touching. Like she didn't get a college degree herself, but she obviously is a very intelligent woman. And she was very thoughtful as an educator. I think many of our listeners are mothers as well. And then I was really struck by that story, like she had with you guys when you were like about 8 or 10. Like she would ask you, like one day you became the premier of India, Prime Minister of India. What would you do?
Give me a speech.
Yeah, tell us about it. How did you feel about, like, do you think it was a joke, or how do you remember how you felt when she asked you that question?
Those days when your parents told you something, you just did it. You didn't question them. I mean, there wasn't a question of saying, hey, I don't get that for, I don't want to do this. If they told you to do that, that's what you did. It was total and complete respect for the elders. So, we did it. And, sometimes I won, sometimes my sister won. It was never even. Whoever gave a better speech, she did that. And I think that gave us confidence in imagining ourselves to be whatever we wanted to be. But she'd also say, I'm going to get you married off at age 18. So it was always this one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it was confusing, but that's okay. For a moment, we dreamed we could be anything we wanted to be. And so I tried that with my kids, and they said, forget it, mom, get a life. And so I think the fact that we were in a society where everybody respected the elders didn't give us an opportunity to be anybody different than respecting our elders. And you can say that it was more controlled than kids have here today. But I think I succeeded because I had a narrow frame. I had freedom within the frame, but it was a narrow frame. And if I did well, that frame was expanded little by little by little by little. I think that structure helped me. So I'm always grateful for what I had. And I don't know what I didn't have because there was no social media and television those days. You see? So I was happy with what we were all happy with what we had. We were not always aspiring for something that was blaring at us from social media every day.
Indeed, and as you said, then you moved when you were when you have this starting family. You said the 1 foot on the pedal, 1 foot on the brake. That's so true because I remember this detail you talked about, saying you have this sort of like a safe, right? Like a safe equivalent in your house where your mother would put two of the same thing for you and your sister,
Right.
like for your.
She'd buy everything in twos, everything. One for my sister, one for me. Yeah.
I wonder, are they still there?
And our home in Madras is still there.
You should have your right to withdraw from that.
I did. I brought a lot of stuff, but it's not really relevant for here. But when at the time when my parents didn't have much money, the fact that they saved so much to get the two daughters married, ultimately we never needed that help because we married people here and we supported ourselves. But the fact that they saved every penny to get the kids married was just unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think that theme I think that theme kind of propelled, and there was this hilarious story you told around when the day you were made president of Pepsi.
That's a legendary story because I came back at 10 o'clock in the night and I came into the house and I walked in. I got big news. My mother would greet me. She said, before I hear any news, go get some milk. I said, Mom, it's 10 o'clock and I have big news for you. She said, nope, don't want to hear the news. I said, why didn't you have Raj get the milk? His car is there. She said, well, he came at 8 o'clock and he looked tired. I didn't want to disturb him. Okay, so I'm coming at 10 and you want to disturb me. When I got the milk, because you never question your mother, I banged it on the counter and said, I've just been told I'm going to be president on the board of directors, and all that you can think of is making me go get milk, not even listening to my news. She just looked at me and said, what's wrong with you? She said, when you enter this house, you're a mother, wife, daughter-in-law, just leave your crown in the garage. And I think that's a profound lesson for all of us because on the one hand, we would like to bring the crown in, but I'm glad she said what she said at that time.
Yeah, I think you have this punchline saying, on the one hand, your mother wanted you to fetch crown. Exactly. At the same time, she asked you to keep
constant confusion live on.
Yeah. But this is also a constant confusion only for women, right?
That's true. Very, very true. I mean, look, the entire society has different sets of rules for women than it does for men. Things have changed. Things have gotten better. But the fact of the matter is, family is viewed as female. We're always looked at through that lens. And so, how much can we change? We have to be careful about trying to change too much or trying to feel like everything is against us and then feeling depressed. I think we have to just live with it and make changes little by little by little.
Yeah. And I also very sharply, for women, almost by default have 3 jobs, right? So if you're a working woman, you have a full-time job, whatever you get for. Being a mother is a full-time job. And being a wife, is at least, half-time job. And you talk about, I think, variation as well, like being a daughter and daughter-in-law, right? Is another almost a full-time job. And how do you feel like you're juggling, through these roles? How did you what's the internal dialogue that happened in your mind when you are switching these roles? Do you have like a sense of resentment at times?
Sense of resentment because the roles have, some of them you do well, some of them you do very badly. Some days you do one role well, some days you do the other role well. So you can't always be good at every role. We all have a perfection gene, That's the problem. You have to park your perfection gene on the side. And you've just got to somehow make it happen. And you've just got to just say, I'm going to juggle all these priorities. There's no balance. There is zero balance. I'm going to give up a lot of things I'm doing, which you end up doing. And somehow you power life. That's the only way to survive. If you try to say, I have to be perfect at everything, I have to do every job perfectly, forget it. There's only 20 hours in a day.
Yeah. And also you said when perfect gene, I think you have this, I actually copied this, I think so well. You said you're not even, the whole society has it. You said women's voices are too high.
But if it's a guy, they'll say, he did quite well, and he's got great potential. So it's always an amplifier for the men and a deflator for women. What can you do? Can't do much. But I come back and say, if you're women bosses, things change. I don't think so. I think in many ways, us women have to think about not just our role as people in a company. If when we become bosses, is our behavior any different? That's a question to ponder.
Yeah. And I think one sociology put it very sharply. He said the problem is that even women are trained to look at women from the perspective of men. So we actually judging ourselves as if we are men, and then although we're not. So that's exactly what I'm saying. So that's why when a man has a certain characteristic, it's oftentimes framed in the positive way. This is something unique about him. This is a strength. This is something that stands out. And then while the similar characteristic on the woman is often framed in a negative way. It's a but, right? And I think that's why you actually pointed to a solution. You talk about this notion of sisterhood. Can you explain a bit more about what do you mean by that?
Now we have more women ascending to positions of leadership. And I always sit back and I go, what if we were all committed to supporting and mentoring women? And for example, let me give you one. Somebody told me the other day, a senior woman, she said, one of the people who works for me, a fantastic woman, came to me and said, guess what? I'm pregnant. And my immediate reaction was, congratulations. My immediate 1.1 reaction was, oh my God, what's going to happen to the job now? Two very conflicting feelings, both very logical and very legitimate. But the question is, if we don't have children, society is not going to progress. I understand that the loss of the employee to the hospital visits or maternity leave is going to be a big issue. So how do you, as a woman executive, balance these two and say, how do you hire and promote women if you have this sort of a feeling about how they live their life as an employee of yours? This is a challenge for us, real challenge.
Yeah. And I think that's why when I think, the Nobel Prize laureate, in her work this year, as she basically talked about, I think the word she used very, very precise. She said, workplace or labor market is very greedy, meaning like, doesn't matter who you are, like a woman or man, mother or not. If you're in that position, you want somebody who can put in as much as time possible, as regular as possible. It's almost the nature of the labor market. That's what it is. And then our society is now structured around it. But in reality, that means a lot of women won't fit in because, a child comes, there's additional, huge load of work that has to be done without being seen in an economic way. How do you ponder that issue? Because I think that's why a lot of women are saying, yes, we see that as a problem, but there's nothing we can do about it. Like that's how, people felt when faced with this,
that's why women are not having children.
In nature.
That's why women are not having children. They're putting off getting married for a longer time. They're saying, I don't want to have children. And the reason I'm now reading and looking at the data is women are saying we want economic freedom. We don't want to be tied to a hand out and asking men for money all the time. We want to stand on our own 2 feet. As we get older, we want to have our own pensions. We want to have our own wealth. And I can understand that. The question is, we also need kids. So how are we going to support women so that we can have families? Don't put all the burden on women and then say she's crazy. Of course, anybody who had the burdens we do will go crazy. And so I think that we have to really think about two things, two conflicting things. If women are as smart as they are and doing so well in schools and colleges and motivated, for them not to be in the workforce is a crime because the country needs them. The country can only move ahead because of talent. The country needs them. But the women also produce the kids. So we need kids to keep the country moving forward. How do you keep women in the workforce, still have kids, and then allow kids to grow and be nurtured? Now, if we said family is family, not just female, the male should also play a part. That's a long haul because I don't think we're there as a society. We're still calling family female. But then
Right.
if you want the women's full potential to be deployed in the economy, it's very hard for it to have more than one child or any child at all, to spend the required time on the child and contribute to society and keep the marriage going. And the man has the option to walk out anytime. And if the woman doesn't have the wealth to support herself, she's got kids to worry about, she has no job, what is she supposed to do? So I think we're not looking at this issue from a human perspective, from a logical perspective. We're just looking at it as women's place is in the home. She should stay home and have kids. And guess what? The men can do whatever they want. No, it's family. We have to talk about men and children are a joy. I mean, I look at my two kids, they're my life. But I've had to make lots of trade-offs. I mean, for example, I'll tell you one thing. Fame has its downsides. Okay, so you're constantly changing how you behave, how you act in your family to be able to keep a family life going. Guys don't have to think about that. Okay, and so it's not that easy. I mean, I didn't write about all that in the book because that was not the intent of the book. But, you know, it's lots of difficult trade-offs, but I wouldn't change anything for the world because at the end of the day, I'm economically independent. I am my own person. I'm a good role model for kids. And I've done a lot for lots of people around the world. And so I look back at my life and say, my life in full is pretty good. I am not going to have any regrets or guilt anymore.
Thank you. Indra, if you can pause for 1 second, I'll take a look at my internet. I think somehow all right, this is like a real situation for me because I have 3 kids at home now. I think they're playing some games. So man, the internet is because usually
the same thing was happening because a lot of the women didn't have internet connections to stay at their jobs. Because the kids were in school, the husband took the internet to do his office work. The women were left hanging everywhere in the world.
Yeah, exactly. I know, right? So thank you for accommodating my real motherhood situation. Yeah. So I think, thank you for pointing that out because I think that actually align, you know, because when you talk about women issue, talk about gender, what I feel is a short-term versus a long-term view, right? So like we talk about, you know, if we have a long-term thinking society, we will be, you know, if you're a rational person, of course you will think, okay, we need to support our women, so we have children, right? So like that's kind of what propels our society forward. But at the same time, we have competing short-term view. So, we need to be more productive. You know, we need somebody who doesn't have, you know, this burden at home. So basically, then society being, you know, the workplace more dominated men tend to veer towards the short-term view. And then I think that you brought up this long-term view, but actually I found consistency in how you became the, you know, drive the performance with purpose at Pepsi. Because it's also a balance, right? Because it's in essence, all the big CEOs operate on a quarterly basis. Everybody wants numbers every quarter, but at the same time, everybody knows, not only you, I think everybody knows long-term is important.
Absolutely.
But it's hard, right? It's hard to trade off, and people would always go for the short-term thing. And so it takes a lot of not only strategic thinking, analysis, and everything, and guts, and to say, you know, we need to actually have our eyes on the long-term view. But I imagine it must be very difficult. And you said you laid out a lot of details in your book, but you know, share a bit with us, because I'm sure people would say, hey, that sounds right? But hey, I want both. I want a short-term view as well.
That's why I say
Deliver.
performance with purpose. I don't say performance or purpose, or performance and purpose. I go performance with purpose. It's how you bring the two together. I think you have to start off by saying, whatever you do, you run the company for the duration of the company, not for the duration of the CEO. You don't tell yourself, I'm going to be CEO for 5 years. Let me do as much as I can in 5 years and get out. If you do that, you can cut, slash, and burn and be anything you want. But I think you have to think of the company as something that has to endure for many, many years. If you think in those terms, you will manage the company differently. The problem is many of the analysts and the investors out there think in the short term because they've never run a company. So there's a big education of investors that has to be done. Analysts, buy side, sell side people to say, running a company and transforming it is a challenge. When we don't transform it, you criticize us. But transformation requires investment, requires patience. And that requires support from, conviction from the CEO, support from the board. And in my case, I had a very good board, and I was convinced it was the only way that the company should be moving forward. And so again, it goes back to the earlier comment I made, at that point, my point was, if I lose my job because of my convictions, so be it. At least I lost it for the right reason.
Yeah.
And the board was very clear. They said, we like the strategy. This is the only strategy. Keep going, and we're going to support you, which is also unusual. And so I think the combination of my conviction based on a forward back look and the board supporting me through thick and thin made it palatable. Not easy, palatable.
Yeah. And I think, and I think the other comment that really made me laugh is when you talked about how I think Tara, your second daughter, was rubbing your back saying, oh, it's just the earnings call.
Yeah. Every quarter she'll come to me and she said, Mom, I don't know when she became the mother and I became the child. She'd rub my back and say, Mom, it's only earnings release, don't stress out. She had no idea what it was, but she knew there was some phenomenon called earnings release that would create a lot of activity, because from the time I was CFO, this was going on, because I was presiding over 75 quarters of earnings releases. So she watched it.
And also there's another comment when I think is probably Preetha at that time, saying that my mother works at a KFC, right?
Early days, she tried to explain to people that I worked at PepsiCo in corporate strategy. Nobody knew what it was. So she said, my mother works in a KFC, because at that time we owned KFC. And people go, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So for kids, their frame of reference, it's not, big titles that, we were.
Yeah. Right. But I think you didn't speak specifically in your book, but I am curious, when and how did you really explain your job to your children? When did they get to what you do?
I don't think they
what's the name?
I don't think they cared at any point. To me, I was their mom. Whether I was president or CFO or CEO, like, Mom, you're just Mom. So if we want to call you, you will pick up the phone. There's no question. If my kids called, I always picked up the phone.
Yeah. And I want to go back to a earlier comment you made with a lot of wisdom, I think, because I know you're a Hindu, and I think lots of us in Asia know about Buddhism, of course, stemmed from India as well. And then there's the sense about layers of self. And you talked about how basically you have I think as a woman, especially at your profile, you were forced to be very fluid in yourself, right? So you have to be, once you enter the kitchen floor, you're the mother. Once you're in India, you were the niece, of some aunts. And then once you're in the boardroom, you're this big executive. And once you're on the operation floor, you're this sort of, high flyer, boss. You have to have a very fluid sense of self. Do you sense that? And you have a very wide range. That's how I felt. Because, for mother, you have, on the one hand, you are the one picking up the gym shirt, from the school or answering the call.
The word I would use is, you have to be willing to be the whipping boy. Because what happens, everybody uses you to blame. Everybody uses you as the cause of the problems. And you have to say to yourself, I'm not giving up my job. I like what I'm doing. I'm going to do my best for other roles. but don't try to get me off my game because I'm not going to fall for all this criticism. And I got a lot of it. A lot of it. People were very proud of me. At the same time, they would be critical of me. And to me, that was the most difficult one. You were not a good mom. Okay, I was not a good mom. In what way? Have you seen other moms who stay at home? Do they do 50% of what I do? I don't think so. And so you set up, other mechanisms to support yourself. And so I'd say that it was tough. I mean, I would say on balance, I got more criticism than I got support. But to me, it's part of the course. Okay, you want to criticize me? Go ahead. I'm not changing a damn thing. This is who I am. Accept me for who I am.
I'm curious, what's the inner dialogue? Yeah, what's the inner dialogue when those attacks came? And you quoted some in your book, which is very hurting. Like, people would be very mean. I won't quote them. So people you can find, if you're curious, you should read the book yourself. But when I was like,
people are mean, even at home, you'd get from various quarters mean statements. And you have to learn to, it will hurt you, but you've got to learn to look past it. And don't attack yourself. Just let it go in one year and come out the other year. It's not easy, For some reason, people believe women can take all of this. We actually cannot. But the more weakness you show, the bigger the problems. If you don't show weakness, people think something is wrong with you. So you have to be very careful in terms of how you react. This is why I think too much is expected of us. So you just have to figure out a way to say, people don't know who to blame for what's missing. So they blame the mom. Something is missing. Mom, where did you put it? What did I have to do with that? Why would I put it anywhere? But the question is, whether you put it or not, you should know where it's gone because you're the mom. You know everything in the house. Okay, and so sometimes you just get tired listening to all the criticism. And then I look at my two kids and I go, my God, I'll take all the criticism in the world for these two kids. So kids to me are like the biggest tether, the most amazing emotional tether. But they're worth every problem that you have because of the time that they take from you. They're worth it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think you also use the word of being the punching bag, right?
Biggest punching bag. You have a big target. And people liberally use punching bag.
And I think I got two deeper wisdom when how you dealt with it. I think one you said is like, people attack me, it's their problem, it's not mine. I don't internalize it. Like I don't, because you said something, I was wrong. I don't criticize myself. I think that's very powerful. Meaning like oftentimes we were hurt not by other people's word, but by how we internalize it, right? We take their words as we accept them and as attack to ourselves. And then you have that almost the reflector, right? So like you kind of reflect it back. Okay, fine, that's what you said. And that's not me. I think that's very wise.
But it's like the duck floating in the water underneath. It's pedaling.
Very busy.
So inside we feel that emotional turmoil, but you can't show it too much on the outside. So we have to develop all these coping mechanisms. They're not easy at all.
Yeah. I think the second wisdom I got from how you dealt with it is this sense of, at the end of the day, it's a sense of deep confidence. As you said, right? Because this is who I am, and I know I'm right. And then oftentimes you are, and like you're smart, you work hard at it, and you know your stuff. Or at home, like I have a good intention, I don't take this blame, right? Yes, I might not be as committed as mom, but I tried my best. So this all comes deep from a sense of acceptance and confidence. And as you said earlier in the book, I think that's what your family instilled in you from a very early age. And any advice for parents listening to this? How do you kind of almost instill that kind of confidence in children when we're parents?
I mean, spending time with the kids is one thing. Here's the issue in you. Now with social media and the internet, kids prefer spending more time on that than with other humans. In our case, there was no TV when I was growing up, no internet, of course, no computer, no social media, no iPhone, smartphone, nothing. So the only way to interact was with other humans. And so we learned human-to-human connection. We learned how to play every evening outside, simple games. We made up games, we made up plays, we made up everything. And the human connection was everything. That made us better people, I think. Again, I'm looking at it through my lens. Kids today become anxious because they're looking at life through that social media. They're always aspiring to be somebody that they're not today. They're aspiring to get something that they don't have today. So it's always a question of what can I get as opposed to how can I be happy with what I've got. I don't think growing up we ever said, how can we become rich like somebody else? We were happy with what we had. We said, God, what we have is good enough. And why are we always thinking about what more we should have? We want to do in terms of learning, but never more in terms of money. It's a very different perspective.
Yeah. And as you probably know, my life is in education. We started the school 8 years ago. And when I was reading your book, from sort of an educator's lens, I found it like, a lot of treasure, like the way you grew up with like 20 cousins, and then the way you played it with each other, and then how you made up your plays. And then those are like incredible source of stimulation and also calibration for kids. And then that's fundamental to education. Like you form a worldview, you form a way of interacting with other people through those interactions. This looks very mundane. It's not like a fancy school, but it is the most precious school. So thank you for putting that in. And then I think that was actually also a scientific evidence that why Indians are smart, because Indians live with 20 cousins.
And if they're not real cousins, all around you, everywhere, every inch of
right.
Right.
Yeah. Then I was like, wow, no wonder like Indra is such a good leader, and she has to learn
this is something. There's a book called The Anxious Generation, written by Jonathan Haidt, that just came out. It talks about the fact that we have to bring the human back to humanity.
Yeah.
We have to have people interact with each other, be in community centers, really have a human connection, because that's what's lost.
Right, exactly. So like, exactly, when we started the school, also people say, okay, we have to be innovative. And people think about being innovative as, giving an iPad to everyone. Okay, have them learn AI, or have them learn coding. I was like, no, the real innovation is putting them in the community, right?
Exactly
them,
that's the first phase. Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah. And then so that's why, although it's not a book on education, but the way you described your childhood experience and so lively, I was like, wow, that's a perfect childhood with a caring elderly, who has like fundamental values, right, and have a community of kids where they can calibrate and learn from real human beings, and also of course different kind of cousins and I'm sure aunts and uncles, and then for you to learn about society and how to resolve conflicts, to form your point of view, how to be how to have. I think that's what part of our debate team kind of benefited as well.
Oh, you bet. You always fighting to be heard.
Right. Yeah. And then so you developed a voice very early on.
And even at home, we were always encouraged to speak our point of view. Don't just hide your point if you speak up. Read, make a point. My grandfather would say, make your point, don't stop, make your point.
Right, exactly. And then I think that's probably one advice if any of our watching want to bring to our home, right? So in kids to have a point of view. And one thing I do, little thing I do, is that every time I ask them to convince me, I was like, convince me, right? And then if you convince me, I will agree.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then there are many things we can do. Yeah, wonderful. And I have to go back to my theme. I think the other time I really cried is when I read this letter, one of your employees to you when you were writing to their parents. There was this letter from this gentleman named Ken. And tell us why. Like, and people can probably feel, wow, this is kind of touchy-feely, you write to their parents, but you have a very real reason, a very personal reason of doing that. Yeah, share with us like why you did that and how it.
Yeah, when I became CEO and I went to India, people would sort of say congratulations to me, but they would go to my mother and say, It's because that you're successful. My mother say, yeah, I prayed 4 or 5 hours a day. It's because of me, she took the credit. And I'm saying to myself, all the senior executives I have are a product of the incredible upbringing that they had. And I've never said thank you to their parents. So that's when I decided that I'm going to write a letter thanking the parents. So what I did is explain first in the first 2 paragraphs of the letter why I was writing to them. I gave them the example of what happened to me when I went to India. And then I had 2 special paragraphs on what their son or daughter was doing for PepsiCo. Very personal. Then I closed with thank you for the gift of your child, PepsiCo. And always copy the executive. I didn't want it to go to somebody non-English speaking and they wonder what this letter is about. And I first thought exactly what you said. People would think, oh God, this touchy-feely crap. But it was unbelievable emotional rush that was unleashed. Parents were emotional. For somebody actually said thank you to them. They never had a report card on their kids. And here's a super positive report card. And I think the executives were touched. The parents were emotional. The parents could be proud about it. And, I wrote about this in the book. One father made hundreds of the letter, stood in the ground floor of his apartment building. And everybody walked in and gave them a copy of the letter and say, see what the chairman of my son's company thinks of him. And so every parent had pride about that letter. And some of the letters I got back from employees about those letters, and I have them all with me still, made me cry. It was just unbelievable letter.
Yeah.
And the parents would bake me cookies,
Yeah.
bake me scarves, do all kinds of cute things. And it was quite an experience. I knew that it would be emotional, never
Yeah.
expected it to be so emotional.
Yeah. I think through this very, seems like a gentle and simple gesture, what you did is that you shine a flashlight on the hidden network of every person, right? It's like, it's in the dark.
Great way to put it.
And you suddenly you turn on this huge flashlight. Yeah. And then like, well, there are people there.
People who are dying to hear about you.
Yeah, yeah, and then I remember you were saying this that in that book talking about this employee's mother or father moved to elderly care, and then the very few things they took with them is your letter. This is the pride of
he wrote me saying the only thing on the living room wall is a framed copy of your letter.
Yeah, I know. That's why like when I was
that letter.
Yeah, yeah. And then that's why it's so powerful because you have this like high voltage light like suddenly shining through. Yeah, and it's a network of people that held these people up, and then like they suddenly saw not only a recognition but a sense of being valued and being seen, and that's so powerful. And then in a way, it's probably only a female leader can do.
I think so.
Thank you for putting that out.
Men are doing it nowadays. They keep asking for copies of the letter, and they're also doing it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think later on, I heard probably the Starbucks CEO did the same thing when they went to Shanghai and then met with the parents of their employees. I was like, now when I read, white hair and gray hair, grandparents are sitting there and listening to CEO commenting on all the children.
Yeah, grateful parents.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this is the best employee loyalty program ever, and then costs almost nothing. Right?
I agree. I'm glad he's doing it.
Wonderful. Yeah, yeah. And now let's go back to a little bit of the thinking part, because there are many again gems in the book about the strategies you made, how you think about how do you learn. I learned so much from you, because at the end of the day, people may think, well, you're a CEO for 12 years, as if you're doing the same thing for 12 years. That's not true at all. Yeah, every day you have a new challenge, you have a new business, you have a new share with us a bit of your secret, how you learn so quickly when you are faced in a new area.
All of us have the capacity to learn if we keep developing the muscle. Read as much as you can, go into details, keep asking the question why. If you read something, ask more questions and more questions and more questions until you understand the issue. I always talk about zooming in and then zooming out. So understand the detail and then come out and say, what is the impact of what you just read? And I think very often we think once we become a CEO or a senior executive, we don't have to learn anymore. Wrong. You have to do even more of it because there's so much more you have to oversee.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you have to be a learning
Yeah.
person even more when you become a leader. And I think that's something people should remember, that learning never stops, never stops.
Yeah.
And speed read, try to develop an ability to store more in your memory. That's the only way to survive. There's no other way to
Yeah.
survive.
Yeah. And I love it about the book where you went back and forth and linking your own experience. I remember you were talking about when you got the new, sort of on the floor experience, you link it to the first sales job you had in the textile company.
Right. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
the observation is right in that money is not made through transactions and looking at the left of the decimal. To do
Yeah.
the P&L, you have to worry about the right of the decimal. Every penny, every route, every sales dollar that you generate, that's where money is made. So you have to respect the front line.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think for the the last time I cried in your book was actually your very detailed description when you knew the process. I would probably back that a little bit. Like when you knew you were made CEO of the company, you actually you sat down in the room and you cried yourself, almost seeing your life.
Nobody was with me at that
time. Playing in front of you.
You get the news and you sit there going, this awesome responsibility is going to fall on your shoulder. The life is going to change. Can I cope with it? I knew there were going to be lots of ups and lots of downs. Okay. Do I have the fortitude to handle the downs as much as the joys I would get in managing the ups? Will I have the ability to stay in touch with my family and my kids in particular and still navigate the job? Will I have the support of family? Typically, what happens is when you become famous, the family dynamics change too.
Mm-hmm.
With siblings and your own immediate nuclear family dynamics change. And I was not immune to it.
Yeah.
I had all of that. And so the question is, will I have the courage and the fortitude to see this through? And it wasn't that easy, I'll be honest with you. It was not that easy. It's not that I came home every day and people showered petals on me. No.
No.
Absolutely not. And so, as I said, fame has its downsides.
Yeah. And I remember you talked about when you made a job, your mother was there, your husband was there, and your daughter was there, but none of your family members congratulated you.
Exactly. And for all of the successes after that, I don't believe people really congratulated me. And nobody in my family, including my immediate family, ever held a party saying, hey, Indra's become CEO, let's celebrate her. Absolutely not. If anything, people made me feel like, now you're busier than ever. What? I'm like, I'm CEO, guys. It's a big job.
Yeah.
But again, why dwell on that? I was CEO. I was going to do that job well because 250,000 PepsiCo employees and their families depended on me. Period.
Yeah.
Subject.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because I can connect to that. And sometimes, when people read what I wrote, and then people will make those comments saying, oh, this is great, but this doesn't apply to our normal people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I hear that all the time.
Right. Yeah. As if like you're now belonging to this category of abnormal people. Of course, maybe in a good way, but still it's abnormal. Like you're lost with sort of reality of what it is. But of course, it's not true. Like you still need to, take care of your household. You go buy the milk
Absolutely.
at 10 o'clock. Yeah, but somehow I think people feel like, now you're in a different category. So, I don't want to interact with you anymore.
I think you down. I mean, they're constantly picking on what you do and what you didn't do well. They never really understand what you're going through.
Right.
But, again, you got to look through all that and say, okay, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably also some of the fears I think women have when they think about senior positions and saying like, okay, now, if I'm senior, I'm becoming one of, the abnormal people.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And
Yeah,
I feel
and
bad that senior women have to go through this thinking. But that's the
right.
reality.
Yeah. And then how do you build your support network in that case? Because you somehow become to this almost this reasonably lonely group, right? I mean, at least compared to the normal people think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
CEOship is very lonely. Being a CEO is very lonely at the top. Your
Mhm.
traditional support structure disappears. People befriend you for your position, not your person. You have to
Mhm.
separate the two.
Mhm.
And you have to be strong. They say that CEOs have to be resilient and personally strong. If you're not, you cannot survive.
Yeah. Yeah. I have in
You
the
have
sense
to
of
be, you
very
have your own support mechanism.
absolutely. I think that's where the ultimate strength. You'll have you to be your own support mechanism.
Exactly right. Sounds awful, but that's the reality.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess in a way, people probably miss the fact that it doesn't matter if you're a CEO or not,
Yeah.
because actually you're always your own support system.
You have
Even
to be. That's why you have to be centered. It's not that easy. You have to be strong. You have to be resilient. You have to be thick-skinned. People say it's easy. It's not. It's very hard. But you have to be
yeah.
thick-skinned. People will try to put you down as they can.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the earlier you realize you have to be your own support system, the easier it becomes.
True.
At least you're not resentful, like whether people are not supporting me, because that's the default, right? So then you become grateful when people help you, and rather than being resentful for the lack of it.
That's true.
Yeah.
But it helps to have spouse support. I had my husband's support
Yeah.
most of
Yeah.
the time. So that helped. He was
Yeah.
unfortunately had his own career, so he was traveling too. But when he was home, he was always there as a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it how when he blames you, suddenly they become your children.
That's right. Right, exactly. Your children. Maybe, what about our children? He said, yeah, but your children. Okay, fine. Love my kids. Love them, love them. I don't care whose children they are. Yeah.
Yeah. But your deep love also runs through it. I think that I want to ask this question, might be a bit more intimate, but I wonder, how do you stay almost connected spiritually? Because I'm sure you guys are, physically very much apart, travel so much, and he has a very demanding job. And you have to almost run your home as a small company, right? Because there are many schedules and all that.
Yeah.
Any advice for young women who are in the midst of this when their kids were young to stay connected to their husband when they're in the demanding job?
Tough. You see, when a husband's working full time and CEO track, he's not connected with family too, but somehow we accept it.
True.
All right. In the case of the woman, not only is she on a career track, she's got the kids to worry about too. When I came home from work, the kids loved it when I wore my own nightgown because they knew I wasn't going out anywhere. They would play in it and they loved it. Oh my God. Now, is that going to keep you connected with your husband? No. But once you have kids, your priorities change. And if you don't marry somebody who recognizes that the priorities change, you go with it, you will have a conflict and all the time.
Yeah.
Where do I stand on the list? Where do I stand in the pecking order? Why are you ignoring me? And there's only so much you can do. You need somebody in your ecosystem to understand you and to say, I know you're exhausted. The job, kids, home, I'll take a back seat.
Right. Yeah. I think, in a way, when you describe how you and Raj met, again, that's a story that echo with a lot of, I think, Chinese in America. And that's really how people met too. Like, you
exactly
through
right.
your sort of, classmate network or, like your
Exactly
people
right.
from the same town, you meet. Yeah, I think I was thinking one thing, my husband and I are similar. I was married when I was 24, very early, and we're both poor international students.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like when we start with little, things probably are easier to last.
Most 100% correct. Because you're building your life together. You're starting with nothing.
Right.
Yeah. When you
Yeah.
start later and you have some wealth, it creates a big problem. You're right. Absolutely correct.
Yeah, yeah. And
Absolutely.
when you said how like you frugal you are, and then how I still remember that number. You said you worked on this night shift job for like $3 for 5 hours or
Yeah,
some
50
crazy
cents
night
more
shift.
the night shift. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, just so that you can make a bit more, and then you have to do your homework and all that. And then the fact that you leave 2 bedrooms unfurnished because you don't have money for it.
Yeah.
And
I
then
mean, the house was
the
empty
fact that
most
you
of the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
cared?
And then, but the fact that the both of you were okay with it, because as you said, most of your drive, because I was also trying to understand your drive, but at the same time, it's also very easy because, you were poor. Like we were poor. We need
You're
to make,
right. When you don't have money for living, why do you worry about furnishing all the rooms? We'll get to that stage.
right.
Yeah. No hurry.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's why I think your book will be such a great inspiration for Chinese readers as well,
Yep.
especially Chinese women, and also those who actually make
To
life
them.
in the US. Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the last like a point it drove me very emotional is when you were leaving PepsiCo,
Yeah.
after running it for 12 years, right? 12 years. And then it's a remarkably successful journey, by any measure, by the performance of the company, by the employee, by the culture, by the strategy. Um, but for you, people would think it's something very difficult to walk away from because that's kind of define who you are as part of your life. How do you dealt with that departure process?
So I think you step down for one of two or three reasons. One, the board throws you out. Second, you have lots of successes and you don't want to lose the successes. Or third, you're tired. In my case, it was the second and third. I had lots of successes who could run the company, and I was exhausted. So, when the
Mm.
board had 5 people to pick from and they picked a successor, and I was exhausted, leaving was easy. I mean,
Mm.
to be honest, I didn't even feel any qualms about leaving. I was thrilled to leave. And the next day, I went to work in my new office, which I set up for myself. I didn't even think about PepsiCo. So now I was in a new life on my schedule, having a full life, enjoying it, happy for PepsiCo, happy about the new leader. He's doing a great job. But from my perspective, no regrets. And past CEO should be seen, not from. So I followed
Mm.
that. I will say nothing about the current PepsiCo. Whatever Ramon does is right. That's what I've always said. There's a board, there's a CEO, they can figure it out. I had
Mm.
my turn, I did my best in my turn.
Yeah.
And so
Remar-
I'm enjoying life.
But you've actually been very busy. And then, so at the last, maybe tell us about the intention of writing this book. But, of course, on the one hand, it's easy. Wow, you had a remarkable life. So many people know about you. Then write a memoir. But I'm sure there's, I know, but I want you to say it. There's a deeper intent. And it's a big task. And why did you embark on it?
Well, I wanted really to provide family support because I think we need family building. We need family builders. We need children. Uh, we need to encourage creation of families. But we can't do that in today's environment where there's more headwinds than tailwinds. There's no paid leave. There's no flexible hours. There's no maternity care, child care available systematically. COVID changed some of the rules and allowed flexible hours, but we still don't have paid leave mandated, and we don't have very good childcare for young families. And so my only point is, let's look at this as a moonshot, and let's say to ourselves that this is something critical for our societies and for having kids that grow up in a balanced way. So let's really think of this as a utility that we have to provide families to encourage them to have children. Good for society, good for the economy, good for companies, good for everybody if we have more children and society can be kept growing. So this was my
Yeah.
plea to governments, to state governments, to companies to say, think of this as a major opportunity. Think about what part you can play in supporting young family builders and women in particular. So
Yeah.
I started there, and then it went into my life, and then came back to this point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very touching because in a way, in a small way, I think my experience resemble yours because I sometimes I was very grateful and thinking about, I have a very supportive husband. I have
Yeah.
very, very healthy parents, and I have a support network that are willing to, come to the US to help me when I need them, just like what you said, very critical way. That's a privilege. Most of women actually don't have it, right? And things are expensive. And then,
Right. Childcare is not available.
right. Yeah. And then in the way we are so privileged. I mean, not privileged in the social status point of view, but by having certain type of family and they being healthy for a period when you need them. But I have friends whose parents are ill when they're very young, right? So then it's almost impossible for them to have children.
If you have a sick parent or a sick child to take care of,
yeah,
all bets are off.
exactly. So that made me feel like our system is so fragile, right? It's like so fragile that you have to have all the odds, sort of all the balls at the same time for something to work. So for you, and then although in case for me, somehow they lined up for a period of time.
That's why I always say I won the lottery.
Yeah, and then
right.
But as you said, exactly, because we look around it, and so like I actually went through this myself because early on when you're successful, you attribute to yourself, oh, because I'm smart, I work hard, of course I deserve it. But then you realize that's not true. Yes, you're smart, you work hard, but there are many more people who are probably as smart and work hard and don't have that.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's like deeply unfair, and that proportionally happen to women. That's why this message is so powerful. And then, of course, as somebody at your status and your influence, your level of impact, having that is such a powerful voice. And thank you for really speaking that.
I think, the value of the book is not just reading it, but small groups having sort of a book club meeting. And to discuss me, it's more to discuss the messages in the book to see what they can do for themselves. So I think that's a bigger value from this book than just reading about my life. I mean, I'm just another leader of the life. It's what I'm trying to tell you about society and children and families and respect and cherish your value system. Think about how to move ahead in your career, how to be a learning CEO. All of these are big lessons. So it's more the discussion as a group that is really valuable.
Yeah. And I think, thank you for that suggestion, because I think by reading as a group, basically we're building a community, right? building a sisterhood.
And include the men in the discussion, because women doing it with women doesn't help. The men should be part of the discussion.
True.
It's a leadership book. It's not a women's book.
Exactly. And I'm glad you made so many examples of your mentors and supporters. They are men, right? So and then
almost all of them men.
Yeah. And then having that part of, and especially it's actually to change the situation for women, largely depends on the men.
You bet. We have to educate the men to help the women, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So your husband should write a book too.
Oh, that's a different issue.
Wonderful. So Indra, if you don't mind, I'll read the last paragraph of your book because I think it's so touching and drive this message home. It says, as I spend time with my mother and my adult children, of course, now I think your mother is 90 years old and your children are grown, and you and your husband are both men caregivers of your own parents. And you said, I sit in the middle of them. I reflect often about the care cycle that I've been part of all my life. I've told Pritha and Tara that when they marry and have children, I will be right there to help, a devoted grandmother and teacher to our next generation, and a backstop and a fierce supporter of my daughters as they seek their own paths in the world. And I will also do all I can to help us build the future of care for all the families that don't have this kind of support. This is my promise. It's so touching and powerful. It's both personal and societal at the same time. I think it's both, as you say, this is my promise. I think that you're saying this is both a promise to your mother, your daughter, your granddaughter and grandchildren, and also a promise to the society, right?
Yep. Trying our best. I think we all have to step up to this challenge. It's a big challenge. And it's a challenge and an opportunity. And if we look at it that way, I think we'll all come up with solutions. I think this is one of the biggest issues many of the countries are facing today. And I think we shouldn't try to address this issue by taking away women's freedoms. We should figure out how to create freedom, more freedoms for women, but also give support structures for them to have families and thrive. That's what we should focus on.
Thank you. Thank you so much again for everything, for your life story.
Thank you for reading the book as thoroughly as you did. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, because it's such an enjoyable book. I was telling my friend, I had lunch with a friend today. I said, I'm living the life of Indra Nooyi in the last week.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It shows, the interview questions shows your thorough preparation. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, that's something coming from a very tough CEO. So thank you.
You did fantastic. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. So thank you for the book, and thank you again for CITIC Press for translating that into Chinese and make the book available and accessible to Chinese audience. 大家还是可以在直播间里看到这本书的中文版，非常非常的难得啊！中文版叫做《第一选择》，它的英文版叫做《My Life in Full》，是 Indra Nooyi 的自己的非常难得的一本书啊！希望大家在这个书的方方面面，从个人的角度来讲也好，从我们思考自己的所在的社会环境来也好，都能受到启发和得到力量。Okay, already. Thank you so much.
I think you were extremely thorough and fantastic. So thank you.